Today, I learned of a new controversy. There's been an apparent uptick in young adults, adolescents, teenagers who have been using mobility devices such as canes, walking sticks, crutches, and wheelchairs. The controversy, it seems, stems from the fact that the vast majority of these people are transgender or non binary. Some people are suggesting that this is all a social contagion, that it's all in their heads, and that they're simply attention seeking. I don't believe these suggestions. I've watched many videos where the people explain why they use their mobility devices. I'll point out now that the vast majority of them were female, and all of them appeared anemic and pale. They explained that they had chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, joint pain, and POTS, or low blood pressure. I believe them. I don't think they're deluded or that this is simply all in their heads. I believe that they're legitimately suffering with physical and physiological health problems. And if it matters, I don't think there's anything wrong with them using a mobility device if it helps them. There's no need to judge them for that. What I want to do with this video is actually take them seriously. What if we do have more young females who are experiencing health problems and that their health is suffering so much that they need mobility devices to help them get around? Wouldn't this be a big deal? Rather than brush these people aside as delusional, I want to figure out and explain why they are suffering from these health problems. Today, we're going to discuss somatic symptom disorders, psychosocial contagions, and anemia. We're also going to discuss what regular people and medical people alike often get wrong about these issues. My name is Brendan. I study anemia. Fundamentally, anemia is a lack of blood. Without enough blood, you can't deliver enough oxygen to all of your tissues. This turns out to be a big deal because oxygen is actually really important. All your tissues need oxygen. If you don't have enough and can't deliver it throughout your body, you will have widespread health problems. Most importantly, your brain needs oxygen. It needs a lot of oxygen. It needs oxygen more desperately than any other organ in the body. Every second of the day, it is using tremendous amounts of oxygen. And this is why if you have anemia, you will surely have problems with your physical health. Also, if you have anemia, you will certainly have problems with your mental health. There's no getting around this. Your brain simply cannot function properly without enough oxygen. I want to emphasize the earlier point that every one of these young females were obviously pale. Anemia is visible because our bright red blood shines through our translucent skin. It gives us a rosy glow, and without the blood there, we appear pale and anemic. When you lack blood, your body redistributes blood flow to ensure that the tissues that need your blood and oxygen the most still get it. This means that peripheral and less important tissues like the skin, your joints, and your digestive tract will get less blood flow in order to preserve blood flow to your more vital organs, your heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver. The same pattern is happening in the brain. The neocortex is the outer layer of the brain. It's responsible for everything humans are most proud of: reason, logic, language, mathematics, social cognition, memory, and more. The neocortex is evolutionarily more recent, and as cool as it is, it's less vital to immediate survival than the deeper, more ancient parts of the brain. The parts that control basic functions like your heartbeat, respiration, hunger, and body temperature. So, when anemic, the body redirects blood flow away from the neocortex to make sure that the deeper, more vital brain regions are still getting enough oxygen. All this means that when you are anemic, the neocortex suffers the most. One of the most impressive regions of your neocortex is the temporal-parietal junction in the right hemisphere. This region of the brain is largely responsible for your somatosensory system. It integrates sensations from all over your body and creates a map so you can understand where your body is and how it's doing. If I wasn't getting enough oxygen to my brain, one of my earliest problems would likely be a problem with my somatosensory system. I might have faulty perceptions. If it's bad enough, I might even have an out-of-body experience or feel dissociation, depersonalization, or derealization. It turns out that the somatosensory system is perhaps the most sensitive to hypoxia. We can suspect this because mountain climbers, when they experience altitude sickness from a lack of oxygen, they will begin to disassociate, have out-of-body experiences, or even hallucinate the presence of a being standing next to them when really there's no one there. The same things happen when people have sleep paralysis hallucinations. Sleep paralysis happens when the sleeper is experiencing sleep apnea and they're suffocating. They often have out-of-body hallucinations, feel like they're floating, or sense the presence of someone on their chest when really there's no one there. This makes somatic symptom disorders very complicated. If someone has anemia and they're not getting enough blood and oxygen to their tissues, they're likely going to have real problems with their tissues. They might have joint pain, fatigue, and they're very likely to feel dizzy, out of breath, and faint, especially when going from seated to standing. The reason is simple. They lack blood volume. But also, the part of the brain that maps and perceives their body, the somatosensory system, becomes faulty as well because it's not getting the oxygen it needs. When you combine this with anxiety, a constant feeling that you're suffocating, a constant feeling that something's terribly wrong, and it's no wonder why these people feel that there's something terribly wrong with their bodies. First of all, there likely is something at least mildly wrong with their bodies. And there is something wrong with their brains. Their bodies and brains are simply not getting enough blood and oxygen. Somatic symptom disorders have been confusing the medical field for centuries. They're very confusing, especially when you're not looking at them from the right perspective. Let's look at how modern medicine views somatic symptom disorders. By the way, females beginning at puberty are far more likely to have somatic symptom disorders than males. Modern medicine doesn't know why. I believe it is obvious. Females beginning at puberty are far more vulnerable to anemia than males. BC Children's Mental Health Hospital says this about somatization. It can happen on its own. Emotions and stress may cause the physical symptoms. For example, Sarah is a high-achieving and responsible teenager who has a small and close group of friends. She recently started middle school and was put in an enriched class for students with strong academic skills. In October, Sarah began having fainting episodes. She would slump over in her desk or fall to the ground. These episodes happened up to 20 times a day. After a thorough medical workup, Sarah was diagnosed with a somatic symptom disorder. You can see that all they can say is basically, it must all be in her head. It just happens on her own. It's her emotions that are affecting her body. I'm sorry, but if a young teenage female is fainting 20 times a day, it is not simply all in her head. There is an organic cause. May I suggest that she's surely anemic. Their thorough medical workup unfortunately does not measure anemia properly. It only measures the concentration of hemoglobin in her blood. But what good is it if she has a perfectly normal hemoglobin concentration, but she only has 3 liters of blood when she should have 4, given her size and body weight? Do they test for blood volume, you might ask? Amazingly, no, they don't. And I've been trying to raise the alarm bells on this issue for over a year now. So how does this relate to psychosocial contagions? Well, again, we have a problem that seems very complex and hard to understand if you don't look at it from the simple perspective of anemia. Modern researchers have zero clue what the actual problem is, and they are left with the stupid suggestion that it is merely a psychological problem, and there's nothing physically wrong with these people. There have been many well-documented psychosocial contagions, and if any of these conservatives who love to say that gender dysphoria and woke ideology is simply a psychosocial contagion would actually look at the literature and read about these psychosocial contagions, they might see the pattern. The pattern is that they overwhelmingly affect young children of both sexes before puberty and females after puberty. This is because young children are rapidly growing and they're at very high risk of anemia and iron deficiency. And teenage females are still rapidly growing while also losing blood every month. The psychosocial contagions almost always happen in poor regions where the people cannot afford to eat much meat, especially red meat, and their rates of anemia are extremely high. What sort of symptoms do they have? They have all the symptoms you would think someone would have if they weren't getting enough blood and oxygen to their brains and bodies. They are always hyperventilating, whether that's in the form of crying, screaming, laughing, or just normal hyperventilation. They are always very faint, dizzy, and they pass out. They are delusional, incoherent, and hallucinatory. I could go on, but hopefully you get the point. These psychosocial contagions are not simply all in their heads. Yes, there is a social element in how they spread, but they only affect certain people, and the people only express certain symptoms. If I saw my friend crying, it probably wouldn't make me cry. But if I was already on the verge of tears, seeing my friend burst into tears would likely cause me to do the same. This would be because I am already in a similar physiological state. In the same way, if I'm dizzy, lightheaded, and feel like I'm suffocating, I am now more likely to start hyperventilating when I see my friend hyperventilate. But if I'm perfectly healthy, I wouldn't be affected. So back to this issue about canes and walking sticks. No, this is not simply all in their heads. They are not all attention seeking. These people are legitimately suffering with both physical and mental health problems. And if you would just look with your eyes, you would see that they are visibly anemic. You would see that they are obviously pale because they lack blood, and you would understand that the problem stems from a lack of oxygen. I'm sure by now I've offended everyone, but I don't care. What I care about is identifying the actual problem, because I would love to live in a world where everyone is happier, healthier, more rational, and emotionally stable. I would love to live in a world where almost everyone is getting enough blood and oxygen to their brains and bodies. I personally know what it's like to suffer with a brain that doesn't function properly. There is basically nothing more important than your physical health. As far as I know, I am literally the only person on the planet who is discussing this issue and looking at mental illness from this perspective. But YouTube does not treat me well. Because I'm talking about health, nutrition, and mental illness, YouTube treats me quite disfavorably because I don't have any fancy letters after my name. If you're still watching, you might be one of maybe 40 people who will initially see this video and recognize the importance of its message. If you also want to live in a world with healthier people, you can like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Please share it with podcasters and recommend me as a guest. My goal is to get onto as many podcasts as possible to bring this understanding to light. I also wrote a book about this subject. I never covered this specific topic of young people using canes because I only learned of it this morning. But I am able to explain all of this because I properly understand the relationship between physical health and mental health, between physiology and psychology, and because I don't ignore the basics. I don't ignore blood and oxygen as if they're too simple to matter. I don't ignore common sense, and I don't ignore what I see with my own eyes. If you'd like to learn more, you can find my book on Amazon. The title is Beyond the Pale: Anemia, the Visible Yet Unseen Cause of Mental Illness and Gender Dysphoria.